This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sports Podcast, where we discuss all the news in the world of sports. My name is Ben.
And I'm Anthony.
Back here on a Friday leading you into the weekend, and it ought to be a great, great weekend in sports, really, as always. But a lot of the attention will go towards the NCAA men's basketball tournament. That's what we're going to lead off with here on the show. We had 3 of 4 games last night. Honestly, really, really good and competitive coming down to the wire. One of them, not so much. And that was kind of my biggest takeaway from last night is how much better Kansas is than really, in my opinion, everyone else in the tournament.
Right.
We'll get to that in just a minute because we're going to start with the games in order of how they finished from last night. So the first game on the schedule was number 3, Oregon against number 7, Michigan. Anthony, last night, my bracket took like a major L.
Right.
Because, quite honestly, I picked 3 of these games wrong.
Nice.
I did have the matchups, well, with the exception of Xavier and Arizona.
Right.
I did have those matchups pretty much intact, but I took a major L last night because
You thought upsets were coming?
I did, and we saw one of them, but it wasn't the one I picked.
Right.
So I took like a major L. But
Yeah.
last night, a team who did not was Oregon. They win 69-68 over Michigan last night. The Ducks get a big second half from guard Tyler Dorsey. He's been doing it really all tournament. He's averaging 23 points in the tournament. He only averaged 13 in the regular season. He had 20 last night. A big, big game for him. Derek Walton Jr., he had a shot at the end there, a deep 2 to try and win the game, but he did miss. He still had a great game. He shot 20. He had 20 points, 8 assists as well as 5 boards. And Michigan really stayed around in this game, Anthony, because of the 3-ball. They shot 31 of them. That's really kind of how they've been going along with their run in the Big Ten tournament and even the NCAAs now, is that they've been staying alive with the 3. They made 11 of them last night, but they just fell short by 1 against Oregon. So Oregon advances to their second straight Elite 8. They have a school record, 32 wins now. Ducks looking pretty good after last night.
Yeah, no, that game was a lot of fun to watch. Something, Michigan, 7 seed, you don't expect that much from them, but it was still something.
Did.
That's fine, you did.
But not many others did.
Not many others did, but, it was a fun game. Obviously the closest of the games last night. We'll get to the other ones in a second. But, yeah, no, it's Oregon, as of recently, basically once the football program kind of tailed off, the basketball program came up. They were, one of the number 1 seeds last year. And, yeah, so we'll see how far Oregon can go. And then we got Gonzaga and Kansas. Like you said, Kansas is just mollywhopping everybody.
Yeah, we'll get to Kansas in just a second because I want to talk about the Gonzaga and West Virginia game because I was switching back and forth and it was like I was kind of watching these games really lined up great. I think CBS did a good job because it was like when one game ended was when the second half of the next game kind of started.
Right.
So it was like I didn't really watch the first half of a lot of these games because the other game was on and ending. So I think they did a good job of that. But the next game was Gonzaga and West Virginia. And quite honestly, this game was kind of just ugly to watch. I mean, turnovers galore. That's what West Virginia does. They force teams into committing an average of 20 turnovers a game.
Right.
And Gonzaga committed 16 last night. So, I guess they did better than every other team has done. And they do squeak out a victory, which I did not expect. I did pick West Virginia. But Gonzaga wins 61-58.
Yeah, Gonzaga continues to win. I think I said this last week. Basically, as far as upsets go, when they're the higher seed, they generally tend to win. We don't have a lot of confidence in Gonzaga just because, whether
They've
it was...
never done it.
Yeah, they've never
been to the Final Four.
They've never done it. They've had some good college players. Obviously, people, John Stockton, even Adam Morrison was really good when he was playing, but they've never necessarily kept taking that next step, and now they're in the Elite Eight. So we'll see how, much they can keep it up. But at least for this game, like you said, ugly win, but still a win and get to the Elite Eight.
Gonzaga really did it last night, and really in that second round matchup against Northwestern as well, with something they don't normally do. They're mainly known for their offense, guys like Nigel Williams-Goss and Premish Karnowski. But last night they did it with their defense. They held West Virginia to 26% from the floor.
Right.
And they only lost by 3. I mean, West Virginia has even a 35% shooting performance, and they win this game right out. So I guess you have to do a really good job to Gonzaga to get that win there last night because of the defense. And Javon Carter was the best performer for West Virginia. He was really keeping them around in the second half. He had 21 points on the night. And now we'll get to Kansas, because I don't know what else you can say about them. They're my pick for the national champion, and last night, I guess you can say, they kind of backed it up. They're playing number 4 Purdue, who are the winners of the Big Ten. They're not playing a terrible team.
Right.
And they win by 32, 98-66.
They've had 3 games so far in the NCAA tournament. Every single game they've won by at least 20 points. The closest game coming against Michigan State.
Which was 20.
90-70. And even, some of the games before that, they were just beating people left and right by a lot of points. You would think that we would be not as shocked with this, right? Because it's like, oh, it's Kansas. Oh, it's Bill Self, national title. He's been a good coach for a while. Is he the best coach in there? Probably not. But he's still someone who's been very successful for a pretty long time at Kansas. But it's still, all the close games we have. I mean, tonight's games are going to be fun, especially something like UCLA, Kentucky. But, Bill Self's just like, all right, cool. And then we're going to go to the next round, see who they play. But, I mean, it looks like they're just going to, maybe up until maybe the championship game, it looks like they're going to be doing pretty well. I
mean, they're so balanced because they have great leadership with Frank Mason III. He's probably going to win the Player of the Year.
Right.
He had 26 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists last night. They have the explosiveness of a guy like Josh Jackson, who had 15 and 12 rebounds, and is probably going to be a top 5 pick if he goes out, which he's going to.
Oh, yeah.
And then they have the outside shooting of a guy like Devontae Graham, who was 5 of 9 from 3 last night. I mean, they're just so balanced, and there's just so many guys that can hurt you. There's still a lot of good teams. You mentioned the teams in the South, Kentucky, UCLA,
right.
Even North Carolina and Butler.
Yeah.
I mean, it's only one game, and you have a bad night, and then that could really screw you up. But I don't see how anyone can really get to Kansas. They're just head and shoulders. Purdue won the Big Ten.
Right.
They beat out teams like Wisconsin, Michigan, Maryland, Northwestern, Michigan State, and they beat them by 32. They just literally look like they didn't even belong in the game.
Right, and you talk about, it's hard to trust college kids because, A, it's a one-and-done kind of situation where, that night his, parents, his dad could have gone to the hospital for something, right? Or it's, he failed a test or something. There's a lot of things that can, mess up a college kid, A, not just because of the fact that they're college kids, and you're kind of just, emotions are wild and random anyways at that point. But, at least to this point, South's got them playing really well. The team, like you said, looks, and it's not like they're playing, mediocre teams, and you're playing, fine, UC Davis, whatever, they're not good, but he scored 100 on them, which isn't an easy thing to do. Then you go against Michigan State, and as much as we talk about, we love Izzo, he beat Izzo. Bill Self beat Izzo. I understand it's not as good of a team at Michigan State, but still, you beat him by 20. And the next game, he said they won the Big Ten, Purdue. And nope, doesn't matter. Moving on to the next round, winning by 30-plus points. It's really impressive what they've been doing so far.
Absolutely. Caleb Swanigan, they really shut him down. And Purdue was up early. It was really, really early.
It was like a 7-point game and a half.
It was within the first 5 minutes, they were up by 8.
Yeah.
And as you said, it was 7 at the half, and then the second half, they just literally just ran away from them. So, and then the last game of the night was kind of, I want to say, the most ironic. Given how it ended, we had number 11, Xavier, the lone double-digit seed left, and number 2, Arizona, which was my pick to come out of the West, and is not my pick anymore because they were eliminated. Arizona loses 73-71, and they blew it at the end.
Right.
It's kind of been the year of the choke in sports. We had the Warriors choke it. We had the Thunder choke it. We had the Atlanta Falcons choke in the Super Bowl, and the Arizona Wildcats choked it in the final 2.5 minutes of the game. Because they didn't score, and Xavier scored 9 to go. They have a 9-0 run, last 2.5 minutes, and they win by 2.
You said that Arizona was your choice to make it make it to the Final Four.
Yes.
Was it your choice to have them go to the championship game?
No, I did have Villanova. So the whole left side of the bracket for me is just like you can throw it in a dumpster.
Sorry,
the right side's still intact for the most part.
Right.
A lot will determine what happens tonight, but Arizona just let it get away from them. They had the game. It was a close competitive game the whole way. And then at the end, they're like, oh, they're by 7, 2.5 minutes. Okay, they're in a good situation. They got it. And then they just picked the worst time to go on a drought. And Xavier picked the best time to go on a run. Basketball is a game of runs.
Right.
And they picked the best time to go on a 9-0 run, the last 2.5 minutes, and win by 2.
Hey, man, I took Duke to win it all, and that kind of blew up in my face a little bit ago.
Hey, I mean, that's what's so great about the NCAA tournament is that you can't predict it. So
at all.
It's okay.
That's why they have, like, what's his name?
Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett do the $1 billion.
$1 billion.
Right, because he knows he's never going to give anybody $1 billion.
No.
That's why everyone's just like, oh, yeah, you want my house? You can have my house if this happens. You have my house and everything. And then, my wife. No one's going to win $1 billion. Like, no one's getting any of these things because, Xavier, fine. Like, I thought Xavier would make it this far. Not this far. Like, I didn't think they'd beat Arizona, but I thought they would make it to the Sweet 16. And then, nope, now Elite 8, and I got that pick wrong. I had Duke winning it all. That was wrong. Obviously, I didn't have some of the early, winners. I didn't have Princeton winning. I didn't have, was it North Dakota State or... like
Middle Tennessee.
Middle Tennessee. There
wasn't that many upsets in the first round, which is kind of uncharacteristic.
I was like the directional schools wrong.
I did read that one guy, and I believe he's from West Virginia.
Sure.
Going into yesterday, he'd only missed one game.
Uh-huh.
And I forget which game it was, but I know his national champion was West Virginia, so he's like totally out of it now. But,
sure.
I mean, even then, he the chances of doing that, and he only missed one game.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is even hard to say. But last night, I mean, Xavier, they did it great. Trevon Blewett, another 25-point game. He's averaging 25 points. He's the tournament's top scorer through 3 games now.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it kind of ironic how it went down last night, okay? Because you have Sean Miller, who coaches Arizona.
Yep.
Used to coach Xavier.
Mm.
One of his assistants is now the head coach of Xavier, Chris Mack, who beat him.
Right.
So it's like kind of like, hey, he left to go out west, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, everyone would do that for Arizona. It's an elite coaching job.
Right.
But it's like, hey, you went out west, and then we got you, buddy. And now, like, you have Sean Miller. Everyone's really throwing shade at him. He said he got out coached last night, and he's never made the Final Four. And this was honestly, I'd say, is one of his best chances. Arizona, of course, won the Pac-12, which was really, really competitive with UCLA as well as Oregon. Have a great player in Alonzo Trier, who had 19 points last night. A lot of good, solid parts as well. You know, Raleigh Alkins, Jackson Cartwright. You have Lauri Markkanen as well. I mean, so a lot of good pieces there, but they just kind of fall short and really screw it up at the end. So
Did you see because this is one of my favorite things. Honestly, this is one of my favorite things whenever it happens. Wikipedia, after something happens,
they
update the stuff. I love it so much because it's just like
now.
So they have for whatever the coach is, basketball, football, they always have the coaching record, right? It's just like, and for college basketball, it'll say whether you made it to like the first round, second round, Final Four, whatever. So, like you said, he was Xavier, then he went to Arizona. So, since about 2013, I'll say like, NCAA Sweet 16, Elite 8, first round. And then this year, 32-4, tied for first in the conference. And then where it would say, Sweet 16, because that's as far as they actually made it, Sweet 16, it's just someone that typed in, you guessed it, not the Final Four.
I mean, obviously it will get changed and updated. But yeah, people always have fun with that. And
right. And then
I guess, but it's like, I mean, you look at Arizona as a whole. You mentioned they lost 4 games.
Right.
Or I think after last night it's 5.
Yeah.
But they lost to, every single loss they had was a team in the Sweet 16. Lost to Xavier, they lost to Oregon, lost to UCLA, lost to Gonzaga. I mean, it's not like they're losing to, like, Arizona State. Like, they're losing to good teams, and you can't really blame them for that.
You can't really blame them for that.
They definitely should have won the game. Like,
they
really screwed it up. So now you look at Saturday, so you have the Elite 8 matchups. So you obviously have number 1 Kansas and number 3 Oregon in the Midwest, and then you have number 1 Gonzaga against number 11 Xavier in the West. So have to see if, I mean, Gonzaga and Xavier, I don't really look at Xavier as like Cinderella, although they are the only double-digit seed, the 11th seed. They're from a big conference.
Right.
They're not one of the biggest schools out there, but they're not like I mean, VCU or Butler of recent times.
George Mason, yeah.
Right. So it's not like they're like one of those schools. So have to see if Xavier can get it done. Have to see if really Gonzaga can get it done as well.
Yep.
Gonzaga never been to the Final Four. This is honestly their best chance against a double-digit seed here. So, and then you look at tonight's games. Tonight ought to be fantastic. In the South, you have the top 4 seeds. You have North Carolina and Butler, and then Kentucky and UCLA. That's definitely the game that everyone's going to be looking at, Kentucky and UCLA. You have Lonzo Ball and really everything he's riding emotionally, and then you have the matchup against him and De'Aaron Fox, who are both going to probably be lottery picks. Malik Monk in there, Bam Adebayo against TJ Leaf ought to be really interesting there. So I'm really looking forward to that game. You have number 7 South Carolina, who just beat Anthony's pick Duke on what was that, Sunday I believe, against number 3 Baylor. So
that was fun.
I've never been a big fan of Baylor this season. I think they kind of peaked at the wrong time. But they honestly have a good matchup against number 7 South Carolina. I mean, Sindarius Thornwell is a great player, averaging about 21 points and 7 boards. And he had a great game against Duke, but hard to really expect South Carolina to replicate the second half they had against Duke when they scored 61 points. So.
Yeah. That was more than they scored in some games this year. In that second half, they scored more points than they did in a lot of games this year. So, yeah, it's hard to expect that they basically do that again.
Exactly. So, and then I would say Butler have a good shot. And then you have number 8 Wisconsin and number 4 Florida, which I think is honestly going to be a great game as well. And given what Wisconsin just did to Villanova, I honestly think they're going to get to the Final Four now. They're in a good bracket in the East, which is 7-3 and 8-4. Florida's a good team, but the experience of Wisconsin, guys like Bronson Koenig, Nigel Hayes, this could be their 3rd trip to the Final Four in the 4 years they've been there. That's crazy to think.
Yeah.
I mean, so I got to go with the experience of Wisconsin. I think they'll beat Baylor or South Carolina, whoever advances there. But honestly, got to be a great night of college basketball hoops as the Sweet 16 rolls on. So we'll take our first break of the show. After the break, we're going to talk about NBA. The Phoenix Suns of all teams setting a record last night for something you probably wouldn't expect. And I think it's a problem the NBA has. And that kind of goes along with resting players and why I think there needs to be a change as far as the schedule. But it won't happen either. So we'll talk about that and more after the break of the GSMC Sports Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
All right, welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. So last night, the Phoenix Suns lost by 28 to the worst team in the league, the Nets, the Brooklyn Nets, 126-98. So you're probably thinking for the Nets to make anyone look that bad, something had to have happened.
Someone,
and
broke their
that
leg.
was the case. Mm-hmm. So the Phoenix Suns last night started 5 guys: Tyler Ulis, Devin Booker, Derek Jones Jr., Marquise Chris, and Alex Len. Those 5 have a combined average age of 21 years and 14 days. That is the youngest starting 5 in the history of the NBA. The previous record was the Clippers in 2010 of 21 years and 143 days. The Phoenix Suns last night had a younger starting 5 than teams in the NCAA tournament. Yes, Arizona, Xavier, Kansas, Michigan, Oregon, West Virginia, and Gonzaga all have older starting 5s on average than the Phoenix Suns did last night. The only team younger is Purdue, 20 years and 265 days.
Right, which isn't that much. It's not like it's like...
Yeah, that's like give or take literally 114 days, right?
Yeah.
So literally, what is that, like 4 months? 3-4 months?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's not that much of a difference. And don't get me wrong, some of these guys, like Devin Booker, he's a stud.
Yes.
He's a good young player,
100%.
Great shooter. In a couple of years, I think he'll probably be like on that all-star cusp range. Marquise Chris, they just drafted in the first round out of Washington. Reminds me a lot of like Hassan Whiteside, a big physical guy, rebounds, block shots. He had a great dunk last night.
Right.
But some of these other guys, like Tyler Ulis, second-round pick out of Kentucky, Derrick Jones Jr.'s name to fame was being in the dunk contest and kind of disappointing. Right. He was in the D-League for half the year. Alex Len's been a bust since he came out of Maryland. And the Suns have gone out and said that they shut down a lot of their veterans and have guys on minute restrictions. And you look at the Suns, they have the second worst record in the West with 22 wins, 22-50.
Right.
You can't tell me that they're not doing this just to tank.
Oh, 100%.
Right? I mean, even the Lakers, okay? Prime example. Since Magic Johnson took over, what has happened? Literally on his first or second day on the job, they traded away Lou Williams, which was their top scorer.
Yep.
Traded him to Houston. Good move for the Rockets. Get another good bench performer, a guy who's known as a six-man, can really score. Great move there. And then the Lakers shut down Timofey Mozgov for the rest of the year, a healthy scratch, who they just signed to a 4-year, $64 million contract in the summer.
Yep. Yeah, you can sit down. It's fine. No, but I want to play. No.
Yeah, a healthy scratch for the... So they're at, what, 71, so the last 11 games? Even before that, so last, say, 12 games.
Right.
You can't tell me that this isn't just tanking. It is.
Like, 100%. All of it.
Even the Sixers a couple of years ago, even still this year.
Yeah.
I mean...
No, the Sixers, the Suns, the Lakers.
I'll say the Kings were trading Cousins.
Well, there's other stuff
I
with
mean,
that.
that's still starting fresh, but even now, I mean, they're basically playing all their younger guys and everything. So.
Right. And on one level, I get it because, you playing Mozgov isn't going to get you anywhere, especially with today's NBA. Now, bad on you for deciding to sign him for a 4-year contract.
Was just dumb. But I realize in the NBA you have to spend the salary on someone. So if you can't attract the big-name guys, you have to overpay for all these, I'll say mediocre to mid-range guys because you have to pay a certain percentage of the salary cap, which just continues to get bigger and bigger.
Right. And don't get me wrong. Congratulations to Mozgov. Congratulations to Luol Deng, who got their money when they're either past their prime or they're not really that good of a player anyways.
Never had a prime.
Right.
So no disrespect, but
sure. I mean, dude, you're making like 1,000 times more than I am, and like I'm never going to hate you for getting your money. I'll just hate on the team for deciding it's a good idea to pay you that money. But, you have all these teams. Like the NBA is in a weird spot, right? Because you have the thing with the Cavaliers a few days ago, right, where it was basically LeBron and everyone was just like, yeah, we're not playing. Whether that's his decision or the coach's decision or whoever's decision it was, you have them basically saying like, yeah, you know how we're going to play these games and we're going to try our hardest and we're going to play 82 games? Yeah, forget about that. We're not actually doing that because, especially with LeBron, if he's healthy in June, it's more important than him being healthy in March.
Right.
So you have that situation. You have the tanking situation that we were yelling at Philly, but the only reason we were yelling at Philly is because they were more blatant about it. Instead of being like, oh, well, he's got a tweaked knee, or, oh, we're trying to see how our young guys are. Philly was just like, nah, man, we're just going to be bad, and like we're going to take all these high draft picks, and hopefully one of them hits. And you can debate whether or not Embiid hit or not because he's still hurt, but they at least were, obvious about it. It was the thing of just like, instead of like trying to like cheat behind your spouse's back, they were just like, look, man, we're going to go over there. I'm going to go see Jenny. She seems cool. If you're mad, you're mad.
This is just, okay, first of all, you had the Suns versus the Nets.
Right.
I don't know who in their right mind would want to go to that game when a healthy Phoenix Suns were playing. There's probably more people in the parking lot outside than at that game was last night.
Like, honest question, like, front row seats. Because certain front row seats, even if it's like...
You probably had to hand them out.
Like, if you're at a Laker game, even if the Lakers are playing the Nets in L.A., like, it's still going to be a couple grand probably because it's the Lakers, it's Staples Center, da-da-da. Brooklyn Nets, I understand it's a new arena, relatively new, and, it's an NBA team, but you're playing the Suns. Like, I
did see that Floyd Mayweather was there. I'm not sure for how long.
Are you serious?
He was at the Barclays Center last night. Yeah.
Floyd!
But for how long, I don't know, because he probably started starting 5 and was like, okay, I'm going to go to the club or something.
He was just, like, looking at it like, this is what he probably looked at his, like, manager or something in the back. It's like, why did I go here? Whose decision was this? You're fired.
I mean, I don't know who in their right mind would be there last night anyway,
I don't even.
But Okay, I think there's two problems here.
Yeah.
Number one is the NBA draft lottery.
Sure.
I hate it. How can you tell me that I have the worst record in the league and I'm not guaranteed the top pick? That is just terrible, okay? And the reason you have all these teams tanking is because more losses means more lottery balls.
Right.
So you want to try and get as many losses as you can to give yourself the best chance of getting the top pick.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the draft lottery, you'd look at, let's use the Suns and Lakers for example.
Yeah.
The Suns have a 1.5 game lead over the Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
If they're both just trying to lose, I mean, there's not going to be any differential there. If you're both just playing, you could go on a little bit of a run or lose some games, and the other team could do the opposite. So there might be a little bit of a chance there. Or you look at a team like the Nets. The Nets are 15-56.
Yeah.
The Lakers are even 5 games better than them. You know that you're probably not going to have the Nets win 5 more games in the last 11 than you are.
Right.
So it's like, oh, I really want Lonzo Ball. I really want Markelle Fultz. Well, oops, the Nets are going to get him. They are by far a worse team.
Right.
So there's no point in even let's not tank anymore. They're going to get it. We're not. So I think, number one, you have the draft lottery, which I hate.
Right.
I mean, you could have a team that barely misses out on the playoffs. Let's look at, a team maybe Miami.
Mm-hmm.
They're a team that's on the fringe of the 8th seed in the West.
Right.
Or you have a team like maybe Portland or Denver. Imagine them getting the number one pick with a 0.9%, when Derrick Rose went to Chicago. That's just terrible, okay?
Yeah.
And number two, there's too many games in the NBA, and that's the problem with teams resting. There's too many meaningless games. There's 82 games. Does LeBron James need to play that one game in the last 82 against it was the Clippers they rested, against the Clippers or the Lakers? You know what I mean? It doesn't need to.
Right.
If you limit the season, every team plays one team at home, every team plays one team on the road. There's no problem because there's not as many games.
Yeah, if you do that, if you say basically, you get 1 and 1 at home, 1 on the road, there's 30 teams in the NBA, so 29, 58 games, basically is what you're saying that they would play for that, and then maybe throw in another, 8 games or something like that. That's just marquee matchups where it's okay, the Lakers are going to play the Celtics again. Or the Warriors are going to play the Thunder again, right? You can kind of do these things with the NFL, how they would always have Brady versus Manning. They'd always have that game sometime in the year. You always throw in the big matchups of games like that, right? You always throw in those big kind of matchups that are going to be on TV, and then you'll be fine. I don't know what the best response to this is, best way to fix all this tanking stuff, whatever. Maybe it's just a thing of whether you're the worst team in the NBA or you're the 9th seed in the conference, you basically all have the same chances. You literally have a lottery system where it's just someone like David Stern style in the first year where he literally just picks a team and he's just all right, the Suns get the number 1 overall pick, and then okay, Charlotte gets number 2 pick even though they have a lot better record. Maybe that's the best way to do it. I don't know what the best way to do it is.
The best way to do it is just literally every other sport. You go by worst record gets number 1, second worst gets 2, because you need to scrap the whole lottery thing. Because let's just say we had it even like that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at a team that's on the fringe. Like Oklahoma City are in a good spot. They're 6th, right?
Right.
But and they're 7 games better than Denver, who are basically fighting for 8th with the Blazers.
Right.
Let's say they were 2. They know they're probably not going to win a championship with only Russell Westbrook.
Sure.
What if they sit him down for the rest of the year, and then they barely miss the playoffs, and then they have the same chance of getting the number 1 pick as, say, the Lakers or the Nets?
Yeah.
One of those teams that, a couple years ago when OKC had Durant and Westbrook both hurt, they got the 8th seed.
Mm-hmm. But
say, for instance, they both sit them down, and then they get the number 1 pick because they just missed the playoffs. That wouldn't really add up. Just get rid of the whole lottery thing. Why do we need to have that?
Because the league was so terrified in 1984, I think it was, either 84 or 85, where they didn't want, I think it was 85, where they basically were scared of teams tanking for Ewing, right? There was a thing where people were tanking for Elijah.
I feel like it was literally set up to have the Knicks get Patrick Ewing because the whole bent card. And
there's a bit
that was set up. You can't tell me it wasn't.
Well, there's a bunch of times you could talk about that. You can talk about the fact that the Pelicans got the number 1 overall pick when they were owned by the league. The fact that
now they have like the balls and there's like people in there, and there's still
Derrick Rose was from Chicago.
There's probably some shady stuff or like.
Derrick Rose went to Chicago.
Of the Cavs getting it 2 years in a row to try and lure LeBron back. So
Cavs got it 3 out of 4 years, not just twice in a row.
No, but I mean, like, the balls makes it a little... And there's people inside there, but they not like they can't say, like, okay, shut your mouth. Like, don't say anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? So just get rid of the lottery. Cut the season to, like, 58 games. And you don't have anyone needing rest because the season stretched out longer. You don't have the lottery, although it's never going to happen because the players make too much money. Steve Kerr said he'd be on board for it, but he's definitely in the minority. So the schedule's not going to get shorter.
Right.
But that's what they need to do, and I think would really eliminate all these problems.
See, the lottery thing I feel is like a necessary evil in the sense of we just talked about how the Lakers and Suns basically sat everybody, right? They basically were just like, never mind about this. They're going to be much more overt about this if there's no penalty to do it. You know, it's kind of like a reason why we kind of need laws in this country as far as just like, you know, we all understand don't kill somebody. Awesome, cool, fantastic. Also, if it was like no rules about it, we'd be a lot more of a crazy people and crazy society without rules. They kind of just like monitor us to be like, make sure we're not doing terrible things all the time. They kind of need these things in place just that way teams cannot be awful about it and then still charge $50-$60 if the Nets are playing the Cavaliers, even though the Nets have a terrible team and the Cavs may be like, I mean, we can beat you guys with our backups. Like, you need these rules in place to basically protect people from themselves. I'm not saying that the NBA cares about their fans because clearly people can sit whoever they want, whenever they want, and the league can't do anything about it. But at least you have to have some version of just, like, appeasing the fan base and making them think, like, you're actually doing your best for, like, a competitive game all the time.
I just hate the whole fact of the resting players for 1 and the draft lottery for 2.
Right.
And these teams are all tanking just to try and get a better chance of getting their 1 pick, even though they're not the worst team in the league. I hate that regard because it's literally the only alternative that we have with the whole drafting in every other sport. Every other sport is, okay, you have the worst record, you have the number 1 pick. Mm-hmm. It's not that, you barely missed the playoffs. You have a 1%. They have a 25, and they have 12, and they have 18.
The numbers are weird.
You know what I mean? I just hate the fact that that's the case.
But right.
It's not going to change anytime soon, so I guess we have to just kind of deal with it. But with that being said, we'll take our last break of the show. After the break, we're going to talk a little baseball. Baseball is starting again in a couple of weeks, but I want to talk a little bit about the WBC, a little recap. I know you guys did it yesterday. Mm-hmm. But something Yadier Molina said about Adam Jones, and kind of, I think baseball can learn from the WBC and kind of mold it a little bit and did kind of how everyone was having fun, well, with the exception of the U.S., I guess, but everyone was kind of having fun about it, and I think that'd be good for baseball. We'll talk about that after the break.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
All right, so let's talk a little baseball here. The WBC wrapped up Wednesday night. The U.S. win their first ever time. They beat Puerto Rico 8-0. Puerto Rico now back-to-back runners-up, so it kind of sucks for them. But I only got one thing to say. Miracle. Miracle. Okay, so basically, Yadier Molina was a little bit upset about... They had a parade yesterday, like kind of like a, yay, we had a great WBC, we got a silver medal, hoorah, whatever.
Right.
Basically, he was kind of upset about... They had like this parade whole planned before the game was over on Wednesday. Basically, and Adam Jones basically said like, hey, we kind of use that as motivation. Like, oh, yeah, they're already planning a championship parade, etc. So Molina's kind of upset, says he needs to apologize because it's about the fans and for our people and celebrating our time there, not necessarily that we won or didn't win or whatever. So basically that's what happened. But anyways, just as the whole thing went on, I'm kind of like with the Puerto Ricans on this one here. Like Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, a lot of the Latin American nations were having just a great time at this whole thing. Puerto Rico, like, everyone was dyeing their hair blonde. I read a story that in Puerto Rico, stores were sold out of bleach for, like, hair dye because everyone was, like, replicating it for the tournament and everything. And I think it's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
And the Americans, like, no disrespect, that's my nation, I'm glad we won, but, like, Ian Kinser's like, oh, it's like, we have to be, like, all old-timers and, like, all, you know, not showing up the other guys. And it's like, no, you don't. Like, Mike Trout's the biggest star in baseball. If it weren't for Subway, I wouldn't know what his voice sounds like. But we all know who Bryce Harper is because he's, like, flashy, and Jose Bautista with the bat flip. But I love all that. Why do we got to be boring in baseball? I just don't get it.
There was a story that came out a while ago. Mina Kimes, who's, like, this kind of new person you'll see at ESPN eventually. She did this story about, like, Korean baseball and how they basically have this tradition of bat flipping and how it's not just a thing of just like, oh, I hit a home run, let's do a bat flip. No, there's like choreographed stuff. Like each player has their own specific thing. Like
it's fantastic.
It gets the crowd. It gets the crowd pumped up. Like so many other countries outside of the U.S. have these things. And I'm not talking about like Canada or it's like France or something like that. Like I'm talking about like war-torn countries. I'm talking about like Cuba. I'm talking about like China. I'm talking about like stuff where it's just like people don't necessarily have the same freedoms they have here, right? But they do that kind of stuff over there. Like they have these celebrations because it's kind of a release from actual reality from them to where us, I mean, baseball is the only sport that like doesn't actually want you to celebrate because yeah, fine, the NFL doesn't want you to celebrate, but that's the powers that be, right? That's Goodell, that's the owners, that's people like that are watching and they're saying, you know, I want them to celebrate the right way, which is kind of the white way, but like they want to do all these separate things and to make the game safe, or to make the game more sterilized or whatever you want to call it. But again, like the NFL, that's like the higher ups. Hockey, they let you celebrate whenever you want to. And in the NBA, as long as you're not basically like looking at the bench and like doing a DX chop, like you're fine.
Like you make an alley-oop, you like scream and flex your muscles. And,
yeah.
And you know my sport is soccer.
Right. With the God, you guys are the best at it.
With the exception of taking your shirt off or running into the crowd, you can do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah.
And it's like...
Baseball is the only one because and the only reason I can think of why it's the case...
It's like the old-time tradition and it's America's pastime and all that blah, blah, blah. We've heard Goose Gossage talk about it forever.
Sure.
And I'm like...
Well, there's two things. There's two reasons why I think it's still the same in baseball and it's not in, say, basketball, right? Number one, it's so ingrained at this point to the sense of you've had people say this for decades, like a century, right? Like you've literally had people the whole time saying how it should be played. And there hasn't been a lot of players that have been counterculture in that aspect, right? Like, yeah, you can say Canseco was kind of counterculture in how he played, and you can say Bryce Harper's that dude now. But when you actually make it into baseball, you're a lot older than you are in, say, basketball. Basketball, I understand you have to wait a year in college, but still they're playing like the Phoenix Suns, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. You're doing it at a pretty young age. Baseball, I mean, outside of like Bryce Harper, who came into the league really young and didn't have to do that much in the minors, like you're starting when you're like 22, 23 years old, and you've already had people who are still playing well into their late 30s in baseball as like a utility guy who are the guys that are like holding the culture, quote unquote, sanctity of the game. Even people like Ian Kinsler, who was on World Baseball Classic, saying basically they didn't like celebrating. And look, people who have listened to this know I love the University of Miami. I'm the wrong person to ask about whether or not I like celebrating. I don't care. I just don't understand why people care so much about it.
I think two things. Okay, number one, I think there's a double standard in baseball. Mm-hmm. What happens when you have your closer come in, the bases are loaded, he gets that big strikeout. He's screaming and yelling what Brian Wilson did, like the crossing with his fingers in the air, like Jonathan Papelbon used to scream and yell at everyone.
There was a dude who did a bow and arrow to the ceiling.
Right, they're like showing up the hitter, but the hitter hits a home run off him. He can't flip his bat. It's like a double standard. That's number one I have an issue with. And number two, who the heck cares? Go out there next time and strike him out then. You know what I mean? Like, you can't expect people to not get excited when they hit a home run or get a big hit. Or, I mean, like the Rangers had like the claw or whatever it was, and that was cool for a little bit. And, I mean, like, baseball will be so much better than it is if it was more exciting. These things are exciting.
Yeah.
What was the biggest storyline in baseball last year apart from the World Series? It was Odor versus Batista.
Oh, yeah.
How did that all start? Because of the bat flip.
Mm-hmm.
Let these things happen. It makes for great storylines.
Well,
baseball could be so much better than it is, and I like baseball. But if you're just watching it on TV, I can understand how it's boring. And it's one of those sports you can watch while you're doing the dishes or folding laundry.
Right.
Everything else you can't really do because you could miss something. And they're doing everything they can to speed it up, and everything's great. But just make it more exciting, celebrating and everything. I think they could really take what the WBC with some of these Latin American nations and build on it. But I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately.
So 2 things. One, you talk about baseball and something you can do when you're doing other stuff, kind of a sport that you're not necessarily actively watching. Like, it's on or whatever, but if someone hits a home run, you can just, DVR it 30 seconds back and oh, wait, what happened?
And they'll show you a replay during the middle or when a guy's, pinch hitting or a pitching change, whatever.
Right. So someone brought this up, and it's not a terrible idea. I don't know if it's a great idea, but it's not a terrible idea where, Little League, they have mercy rules, right? Which is basically, I don't know if it's 10 runs or whatever. I don't know exactly what the number is, but basically you score enough runs to where, the teams are just okay, we're going to stop this. This is kind of like overkill at this point. We're just going to go home. Or they want to put that at 12, 15, 20 runs, whatever it is. Let's say baseball decided to implement that, right? Let's say they basically decided to make their own version of the mercy rule. You're not telling me, let's put it at 15 runs, right? Let's say 15 runs is the mercy rule number. If you're up by 14 runs in the top of the 8th, you're not telling me you wouldn't watch to see if you can mercy rule another team. It would become exciting at a certain point to where you kind of watch something like that. It would be something to bring a little bit more fun into baseball because you just basically want to have the bragging power of we mercied the Royals or we mercied the Indians or whatever. It'd be fun to do that. And then secondly, okay, what's the what happens if, let's say you're the pitcher, I'm the batter. I hit a home run, bat flip, jog around the bases a little bit slowly. What happens, and assuming I'm not a pitcher, what happens the next time I come up to bat?
I'm going to ding you.
Right. Which, A, is a little bit childish. I'm going to throw this baseball at your head because I don't like what you did. That's a felony in any other scenario. And secondly, let's just reverse that. Let's say I was the pitcher, you were the batter. I threw it. You hit a home run. No bat flip, no nothing. Just run around the bases normally, head down, jogging, very nice, very respectful, everything else like that. You come back up the next time, I'm hitting you. I didn't like what you did. I don't think you celebrated hard enough. It would make no sense, right? It's well, why are you hitting him? You did it the right way. I don't like how you did it. It's the same thing, just in reverse.
It's not going to I just wish it would, man. Baseball could be so much better if it was more entertaining, and it's
it's going to take...
build on this. Realize what you have here. The WBC... Quite honestly, I felt like was going to be disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was
good.
Almost more exciting than the regular season.
It's going to take Bryce Harper, but not one Bryce Harper. It's going to take 15.
Take a whole league of them.
Yeah, it's going to take 15, 20 Bryce Harpers who are all kind of younger, super talented players who basically want to do this stuff, and they're too good for you to basically silence them. It's going to take that. It's going to take a bunch of Bryce Harpers. It's going to take a bunch of... I don't know who else is another one that's in the league. Is Chris Bryant that guy? I don't think Chris Bryant's really that guy. But it's going to take people who are really young and don't care about what you talk about the sanctity of the game.
Right, and I hope it's going to happen, but I just don't really think it is. But I thought the WBC was great. I'm happy the U.S. won, but I definitely want to see them build on that. Listen to your customer. This is what we want. Please,
to be fair,
do it.
To be fair, it's what we want. I don't know if it's what the whole fan base actually wants.
I feel like the majority of the fans, I realize it's an older demographic, but
baseball's viewed by 50-year-olds.
A lot of the older people are dying off, though, man. We're going to be those old guys soon, and we're going to want this. Please, let it happen.
Yeah.
All right?
I'm with you.
Please. All right. That's going to end the show for today, leading you into the weekend. Hope you had a great, great day. Thank you for listening. My name is Ben.
Hey, I'm Anthony.
We'll be back here on Monday looking at the Final Four and all the other storylines in sports here at the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a good weekend.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.